Unit 1, Lesson 1, Perfect Squares and Square Roots, SOL 7.1D. I can identify the perfect squares from 0 to 400. I can determine the positive square root of a perfect square from 0 to 400. What are perfect squares? It's a whole number multiplied by itself. For instance, 6 times 6, that's a perfect square. 1 times 1, a million times a million. Any number times itself is a perfect square, and this is how it's written: a, or the number, squared. We use the radical, and you'll see this sign on the symbol on your calculator, to find the root of the perfect square. It may look like this, a radical with an x. X squared. You also will see this symbol, y to the x, when you're doing anything above a square. The square root of 27 and the square root of 75 are not perfect squares. Let's see why. Your perfect squares, you have to learn them from 1 to 20. 1 times 1 will give you 1. That's a perfect square. And the numbers from 1 to 20 are the roots of the perfect square. 20 times 20 gives you 400. And that's the perfect square. 4 times 4 gives you 16. 16 is the perfect square. 4 is the root. 11 times 11 gives you 121. 121 is the perfect square. 11 is the root. So when we put it under the radical, for instance, 4, the number 4, we get 2. So 2 times 2 equals 4. The perfect square is 4 and the root is 2. Perfect squares have same columns and same rows. 111 and 131 are not perfect squares because they do not have same columns and same rows. How do you find out? Look for the radical button. For instance, 169. Put it under your calculator, under the radical. What comes up? Do you get a whole number with no remainders? Yes, that's 13, because 13 columns, 13 rows times itself gives you 169. 169 is a perfect square and 13 is the root. When we're talking about area, we're talking about side times side or side square. And if it's a perfect square, then the sides will have the same length. 121, the area, side times side. How do we know what's one side? We put it under the radical. Or we remember what times itself gives us 121? 11. How about 144? If the area of this square is 144 feet square, what is the side length? In other words, what is the root of 144 squared? Yes, area equals side squared. The side is 12 because 12 times 12 is 144. Same columns, same row. What about 256? Put it under your radical, or ask yourself what times itself gives you 56. If area is side times side, what number times itself gives you 256? Yes, 16. Same columns, same rows. Which is a set of perfect squares? We can eliminate the first one because nothing times itself gives us 8 as a whole number. Nothing times itself gives us 15 as a whole number. Here, 2 times 2 gives us 4, but nothing times itself gives us 8 again. So the best answer is C. 4 times 4, 5 times 5, and 6 times 6. Which perfect square is between 96 and 120 when we're looking at the number line? Again, you need to know your squares, you need to know your roots, and then multiply it by itself. So if I go to 7, 7 times 7 is 49, 8 times 8 is 64, 9 times 9 is 81, 10 times 10 is 100. Yep, I just passed 96. 10 and then 11 times 11 is 121. So the number in between that's a perfect square is 100. Perimeter and squares. A square flower garden has an area of 144 square feet. What is the perimeter of the flower garden? Remember perimeter. You're going around the rim and you're adding the sides. So we've got this square right here. We're asking ourselves, what times itself gives us 144? If you don't remember, please learn them. Put it under the radical. And we'll find that 12 times 12 is 144. Remember, put it under the radical. And so now we go around the sides and add it up. There are 4 sides. Each side is 12. 4 times 12 is 48, or add all 4. 12 and 12 is 24, and 12 is 36, and 12 is 48. So it's 48 feet. Area is squared, and feet is not. Joe placed drinks on a table in rows and columns. All the rows and columns had the same number of drinks in them and formed a square, which could be the total number of blocks Camille placed on the table. It's supposed to be Joe. We know it cannot be 28 because it says it's a square. And all the rows and the columns had the same number. So it's a number times itself. Nothing times itself as a whole number gives us 28. Neither 44, neither 132, neither 341. But 10 times 10 gives us 100. So we know that is the correct answer.